That is like textbook Albion as well.
It is, isn't it? It's
It really is.
All right. Welcome, episode 281. We are recording right on the back of Sunderland conceding a 94th minute and 52-second losing goal away at Leeds. And Robin has some personal stakes in that because he's rather local to the Sunderland gang, so he's feeling quite good. If he wasn't feeling good about Friday, this is just the cherry on top of what has been a very nice cake.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's nice to see other teams do that sort of thing when it's not us.
Especially a team you like to see do badly, right?
Yeah, it's all good.
All right, well, welcome. Feels like we're going to be going over a game from forever ago, because we played on Friday night, which is always just a little bit weird, isn't it? Reviewing it, even if we'd reviewed it yesterday, it would have been just like a strange feeling. But we are here, we are live. How was your weekend? Some interesting Premier League results across the board, and obviously going into the back of that, you've got the win against Chelsea, completing the double. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, positive all round. I think it's a good set of results for us, largely, wasn't it? Villa dropping points, which is always good. Man United just getting worse and worse by the week, which is hilarious as well. Southampton just seem, I mean, us going to that Southampton game, they just seem like they're gone, right? Like there's no coming back from that. They look like, I mean, that's their kind of main South Coast derby. And to me, at least on the highlights, the ground didn't look full, even from the beginning, right? Like you could tell that there's quite a few empty seats on that. And I was looking at tickets. There was a thread on North Stand Chat about Brighton fans basically trying to buy tickets for the home end at Southampton. Obviously not something we would endorse.
Would we not?
But looking at the seat map of like seats that are available, like it's mad. So they have fully, like everyone associated with that club has seemingly fully given in and just written this season off already. Which, considering we're in the middle of February, is mad.
I mean,
really.
yeah, it shows how bad things have gotten for them, doesn't it? Really. I spoke to our friends in that number podcast, which is the Southampton one, and I spoke to them back when we were under Graham Potter, and they were in the league previously. But for him, like for them, they just said like they are so clearly out of their depth this season, like, and felt they were very lucky to be back in the first place. And they proved they don't deserve to be here. Like that's how downcast they are.
Yeah, pretty early on as well, weren't they? Like their signings, I think, or lack of signings, pretty much nailed it on before a ball was kicked, near enough. And didn't they have a couple of games? I remember there was a couple of games kind of not that far into the season where they were chucking away like 2-goal leads at home, I think. They did it a couple of times quite late on, I think. Obviously the best teams, only the best teams do that, obviously.
Yeah. But enough about Southampton. Let's talk Brighton at home to Chelsea. First of all, Stephen in the chat asking if we can confirm that Doge are now investigating Chelsea's transfer policy. I think we are so far beyond a point, Stephen, of talking about US politics. I think we're just going to smile and laugh because if we talk about it too deeply, I think we'll all just cry. So let's just move on from that and take a look at what was, quite frankly, a Fabian Hertzler tactical masterclass on Friday night under the lights at the Amex, re-welcoming Chelsea down in less than a week. And we played what was very much a back five. Verbruggen in goal, Lamptey at left back, Webster, Van Heck and Veltman at centre half, and Minteh at right wing back. And then we almost played like it was kind of a four, but not it was a strange group of players in front there with Hinshelwood and Baleba joining in on very much anchoring that entire back line. And then Mitoma, Ruta and Welbeck, along with those wing backs, essentially offensively being allowed to form a five of their own. It was quite an interesting watch. And Mitoma, Hinshelwood, Baleba, Ruta, and then Welbeck up top as well. For Chelsea, only a few changes. Enzo came in for Dewsbury Hall. But for the most part, their bench looked pretty grim again. But not a great deal of changes for Enzo Maresca's side. When you looked at this and you looked at the form Chelsea have been in lately and the win we got in the FA Cup, how were you feeling? Because it's always such a strange phenomenon having to play a team so close back to back, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I was expecting them to make more changes, but I suppose they haven't got the personnel fit to do it. So when I saw their starting lineup, I was relatively confident, as far as we can be confident about anything this season, because it's been such a topsy-turvy. We've gone into games that we think we're going to do all right in, and we've, had our backside handed to us. And then we've gone into games where we think we've had no chance and done the opposite. But no, I think after that Forest game, these two games against Chelsea were just, it was such a knife edge, wasn't it, really, for how it was going to go? Because I think for those of us who've been more skeptical about Hertzler to this point, it was a real sink or swim. The reaction in these two games was really sink or swim. Like, absolutely. How's it going to go, right? And I think all those rumors about whether there was unrest and were the squad happy, etc. It was like, okay, you've got two home games against Chelsea, both of which are going to be in like slots on TV where there's like no other games taking place, pretty much.
Nowhere to hide.
The full focus from both of these games was going to, like, of all the neutrals, everyone involved in football, it was literally there was nowhere to hide. It was a proper sink or swim. And, I'm absolutely delighted that we have come out with 2 wins, that we deserved both of them, right? We've not kind of not fluked our way through. I don't really want to focus on how bad Chelsea were, because I think that detracts from the fact that with those 2 performances, I think we'd have probably rolled over a lot of other teams.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is they put out a front four of Neto, Palmer, Madueke, and Nkunku, and at the end of the day, that is a front four that should be capable of causing damage to anybody, and they didn't, right? They flat out didn't. They had 8 shots, none on target. Like, that's not an accident, and that is largely down to the tactical style that Hertzler threw out there. And I think for me, the first talking point, really, before we get to my favorite piece of the podcast, I think it's going to be for the pundits themselves, I think they're still like talking about it today. But let's talk about just a moment prior to the first goal. And that was, I think, the first death knell in this Chelsea side performance. And that was Madueke going off early with a hamstring injury and replaced by Jadon Sancho. He looked like the only bright spark in that Chelsea side going forward in that first 20 minutes. And he was causing a lot of problems for Lamptey. And then he goes off injured. They switch sides and they don't get a sniff for the rest of the night. I think that really helped settle things down, right? Because he looked well up for it. He is obviously a very talented player. He's England now, right, as well. So I think that for us was huge. And then obviously everything that comes after we'll talk about here shortly. But
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that was obviously, Sancho was basically their only experienced attacker on the bench, basically. So he's got to come on and play 70 minutes straight off.
Yep.
So it's ideal, really. I agree with you. The couple of times where Lamptey was kind of left for dead slightly, and I thought, this could be a little bit problematic. But when it's we've had games where we've not had the fortune to have circumstances like that in our favour. So I'm never gonna be sorry for them.
Well, no, exactly, and obviously they'll bemoan their injuries, right? But we're starting Adam Webster instead of Lewis Dunk. We're starting a bunch of players that, although would probably get into the first team, obviously, right? Like your Van Heckers, your Veltmans, your Belabers are all obviously going to be starting all the time. But there's a huge amount of depth in the squad that still isn't available, right? We've got huge signings. Weaver, who just made it back to the bench. Kadioglu, who's now gone for the season. Like we've had a rough season of it too. So yeah, I mean, for me, like it's just an unfortunate thing, but it feels like it's every other game someone's going down.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we're top of that injury league table, aren't we? So that's enough said. Like
6 minutes later, however, I think Jamie Carragher said it was Messi-esque. Shearer 2 days later on Match of the Day, a day later on Match of the Day, was still slightly speechless. There's been a lot of people just watching it as some of the best professional footballers on the planet watching it and just laughing because it's just unbelievable. First of all, the ball from Bart Verbruggen. He's had a rough time of it conceding those 7 and then the own goal against Chelsea. He went on to play really well after that, and he's now supplemented that with an unbelievable ball over the top. But I mean, how long have we got here for talking about this first touch?
Spend the rest of the podcast talking about it, to be honest, because I've probably watched it 24 times, I reckon. And in my brain, I still don't think he's going to take it down with the first touch. I think it's I've seen Messi, I've seen people compare it to Zola. I think it's Bergkamp.
Bergkamp has been a lot of them.
He scored a couple of those goals in prime kind of Premier League era. I think a goal against Newcastle. Was it the Newcastle one? Where it's very similar to that, not from the same distance, but pulled the ball down out of thin air, basically, and put the defender on the floor. I mean, there's so much to unpack in it because there's 3 elements to it. Like, one is like the outrageous first touch, right? Like, just to execute that alone is enough to just think, what on earth has happened?
We had someone on the FA Cup episode that we did a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember who the listener was, but one of their kids went to the game. That was their first game, or one of their first games, and they said the kid said, I can't remember who it was. I'm so sorry, whoever it was. Feel free to message me. But they said that their kid said Mitoma was like a robot with pillows on his feet. That was the kid's description of him. And a week later, he does something that like
it's
the human body shouldn't be capable of.
Yeah, like I say, it's the element of like managing to actually control that ball stone dead is off the charts. You've then got the fact that he's taken 2 perfect touches after that to take him beyond the defender. And then you've still got to put it, like, you've then still got to finish it after all of that. I mean, we've seen, like, I've not seen him make a first touch as good as that before, but we've seen him make some ridiculous first touches, but then not manage to convert that into a goal, right? So to have all of that, I mean, yeah, it's just phenomenal. I mean, like Danny Welbeck, you can see him like grabs Mitoma and is just shouting "wow" in his face, basically, which is like he's just lost it. I mean, it's
Stephen in the chat saying it looked like something out of an anime cartoon, and like it
basically did. I mean, it's one of those goals. If you score like it's a goal that if you scored it on FIFA, you'd just be thinking like the game's gone, right? Like I've cracked the.
You clip it one
matrix.
You'll absolutely clip that.
You've clipped that and probably never play again. But it's just, I mean, it's there's not much you can actually do to do justice to how good a goal that is. And I think you're spot on. It's the fact that you see plenty of goals scored where fans get very excited about it and wax lyrical about it. I don't think I've seen a goal for a long time where virtually every ex-professional acting as a pundit or commenting on it elsewhere has universally just gone, how on earth has he done that?
Yeah.
Like, and it's, this is not like, this is, this, like you say, this is the Alan Shearer is like the Premier League record goal scorer, right? Like, this is not, whatever you might think of him as a pundit, this is someone who, there is no one who has scored more Premier League goals than him. Going, how has this player done this?
Yeah, he knows what a good first touch looks like.
Yeah, basically he does, and it's like, it's phenomenal. And we've seen it, right? I mean, that Wolves goal that he scored, season before last, was it? Or last season, where he dribbled past everyone, basically.
It was last season, yeah.
Like beginning of last season, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like one of the opening games, wasn't it?
It was. I think it was our 4th or 5th game, because I was at that one, and it was on ours, like the away
at that side, isn't it? Yeah,
it was just unbelievable. Yeah.
So I mean, to have a player who's able to score, like, he's just like, I don't know where he's going to end up. Obviously, we can see why he decided he wasn't going to go to Saudi Arabia, right? Because it's like, this guy can do that at the very, very top level.
He doesn't need to go to Saudi Arabia.
I mean, it's a very satisfying game to do it in as well, isn't it? Like, of all the games to do it, it's sort of like, okay, you can come and buy 200 odd million pounds worth of talent, and then, like, you've sort of ignored the one who's then just gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean, the keeper gets a hand to it, right? And I think there's some people are thinking he maybe could have done a little bit better with it, but
it's harsh.
I think it is the decisiveness post touch, like that. Like you say, he then takes 2 touches immediately after bringing the ball down, as if he knew he was going to bring it down in that manner, which is astonishing in and of itself. The 2 touches and the strike was so quick that I think that, like, I mean, there's the positioning, the preparation. Like, the keeper hasn't got time to set himself in such a way. Like,
no,
it was in the bottom corner. Like, it was.
I think it's harsh to say he's going to get. He should have got anywhere near. I mean, he got as close to it as I think he was probably going to get.
But I think it's an
astonishing goal. It's just, I mean, it's astonishing.
Like, unbelievable.
I mean, I don't know whether there's like, is it the best goal? I mean, I think it's the best goal. It must be the best Albion goal I've seen.
It's got to be up there. I can't think of a better Albion touch. Like, I can't think of many touches I've ever seen a player make in my entire life as good as that. Like,
but you know what the thing about Mitoma is like, he's had games this year where his second touch has been a tackle, right? quite a lot. Like, I think one of the games I think Ipswich at home we had, like September, October, that was 0-0. Yeah. He had a couple of, he had like 3 or 4 touches in that game where he was just like woeful.
But as you say, he's done these kind of things before, because if you think back to, I think this was 2 years ago in the January at the FA Cup when we beat Liverpool with that late goal.
Which is such a good finish.
The touches he took there to, like, bring it down, bring it over the player, basically. And put it insane. So, like, he's just an incredibly talented player.
I mean, Stephen,
27 years old as well.
In his prime. I mean, Stephen makes a really good point in the chat. He just wonders whether that's going to make teams change their approach slightly, knowing that we've got that in the locker. Because it's like you said, the distribution from Bart is sort of what we have been more used to Jason Steele doing.
And
we've seen a few, right? We've seen a few long balls from those two. I think he did one. I think Steele did one to Mitoma that he scored from directly, not with anything like that, but similar, where it's pinged it over the top. So it'd be interesting to see whether they now think, okay, we've got that to contend with. But it just knocks the stuffing out of it. I mean, a goal like that, it just sort of knocks the stuffing out of the opposition, doesn't it? Straight away.
And Stephen's given us a great segue there of talking about sitting back, because that's exactly what the Albion did basically all game. And once the first goal went in, we really sat back. The final stats, by the way, was 69.5% possession for Chelsea. But we had 13 shots, 5 of those on target. They had none. Our XG was far superior to theirs. We literally turned up to our own ground and did what Forest did to us at the City ground. In that we allowed them to have lots of inconsequential possession. But as soon as we won it back in our final third, the pace and just lethality that we actually counterattacked with was unbelievable, wasn't it? Like, that is not something I've ever seen this Albion team do in the Premier League before. Ever.
No.
Like we saw it under Houghton in the Championship, right? I'm sure everyone can remember those insane counterattacks you just randomly get with Knockaert and a couple of others just busting forward. Sam Baldock, right? Mitoma Ahmed, like all of them just bursting forward and scoring goals, Championship style, end-to-end, like crazy stuff. I can't remember us ever setting our stall out like this for a football game before in the Premier League.
No. And it's I think we're starting to see a bit more about that Hertzler blueprint now, right? Especially with we talked a lot about him at St. Pauli having this we had this third centre midfielder dropping in to form a back five. And he's now done it in a slightly different way, albeit in defence, Minteh's, when we haven't got the ball, Minteh tucks in to make it a five. So we're starting to see little tweaks about that. And I think it's one of the things I really read about the St. Pauli thing was the speed of transition from defence to attack was one of his core things. And we've seen that over the last, I said after the first Chelsea game, I think I put it in our chat, like one of the key differences in that game was the speed of transition from defence to attack. And it's Minteh. The key of it is, like they said in the commentary, Minteh has been working on the defensive side of his game. And that, like, having him and Veltman as a right side now is so solid.
Well, you say that kind of speed to attack. The second goal, 10 minutes later, comes from a clearance from a Chelsea player inside their own box. It comes out to Baleva in the middle of the park. It goes to Ruta, to Welbeck, one touch. Ruta, unbelievable, by the way. Like, he then bursts into the box and absolutely fizzes a crossover, almost causes an own goal. Welbeck takes a touch in the middle of the 6-yard box and just gently lays it off to Yankuba Minteh, who then proceeds to take a touch that reminded me very much of Trossard. In that, like, he just kind of made the slightest move and sent Cucurella on his ass, like absolutely rinsed him, and then just slammed it into the back of the net. And at that point, 2-0 up for about 8 minutes till halftime, and the Amex was buzzing.
They've just had a goal
Chelsea
disallowed as well, right? Which is the classic. It's the classic.
How did you feel about that?
It's classic Veltman, isn't it? Like,
it's a push in the back, though, right?
Yeah, but Veltman has made the absolute most of it. It's one of those ones, like, if he doesn't, it's one of those horrible things where we always, you often talk about players making the most of it in either box, right? Either as an attacker going down or a defender going down. If he doesn't go down like a sack of spuds, then it's a goal. I think he has to make that much of a meal of it, because if he stays on his feet, I think the referee goes, that's a fair challenge, goal. And as much as he like that, it's classic Veltman kind of gamesmanship in that sense. It's a push in the back, but he's had to accentuate it to get the decision, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, it is a foul. And
he's jumped on it. He's used him as leverage, right?
If that was at the other end and Welbeck did that, I'd be fuming at Welbeck. I wouldn't spend too much time being annoyed at the referee with VAR for ruling it out. Like, I'd be livid at Welbs because I'd just be like, there's just no need. Do you know what it reminds me of? Is back in the days of Peter Crouch, and he was so good in the air, but he would needlessly use his arms so often and draw fouls that way. And it's like, you're 6'7" and no one can defend you. And you're still getting your shoulder out there. Like,
it's mad.
It reminded me, obviously Enzo's a lot smaller than Crouchy, but like the manner in which he did that, he was so, the worrying part is he was so open, right? Which is not good. But he was so open. He didn't need to do any of that. He could have just jumped up and headed the ball in. But you can't put two hands on Joel Veltman's back and expect him not to rinse that for you, right?
I think that example is a classic of what is wrong with Chelsea, in the sense that so many players make poor decisions all over the pitch. We'll come on to the third goal with Cole Whittle's reaction to not getting the free kick.
He was their captain as well, wasn't he? And so
yeah. There's so many examples.
Summarizes everything.
That's what I mean. There's so many examples of players making needlessly bad decisions in situations where it's just not warranted. Like, it's just not warranted at all. So, but it's that classic double whammy, right? Like within 2 minutes, you go from a situation where you think it's 1-1 to being 2-0 down, and that you see it time and time again. The dynamic just shifts. Even I think it sounds weird to say it, but when you go from that situation where you think it's been 1-1 and you go to 2-0, it's actually more of a blow than just going from 1-0 to 2-0 without that bit in between. It's almost like 1.5 goals, because you've come off the back of that situation.
Yeah, it's the mentality for fans and players going home with a draw when you can see the last minute equaliser. It feels more like a loss than a draw. Or likewise the other way around, right? Like, it feels like you've won when you come away 2-2 with
exactly.
minute, let's say. Halftime arrives. Caicedo gets booked shortly before halftime. But Chelsea end the half with 6 shots, 0 on target. 92% pass success rate, 72.3% possession. So that's the most possession any team has ever had against Brighton in 45 minutes of football since stats began, I guess, that they had on there. And Brighton and Hove Albion are 2-0 up at half time. Goals from Mitoma and Minteh. And it's just an unbelievable change in tact. It's great. We come back out at half time. No changes. I was fully expecting to see something change for Chelsea, but maybe it really is like necessity looking at their bench. Like, what do they bring on? Reece James, I guess, but he's so injury prone as a risk as well. And the second half shapes up basically exactly as the first half ended. Honestly, I could not believe that 0 tactical changes have been made from Chelsea. The only difference is they poured forward more and left themselves open more. And I think it's Mungo in the chat is kind of has a regret we didn't score 6. And, it's really not understating how many it could have been. Like, it really became this unbelievable pattern back and forth up the pitch where we really could have scored 6 or 7 and got that goal difference back from the City ground, right? It was Enzo Maresca made no real changes and just got worse. Like, what? It's
really strange. I mean, as I often do when we have quite amusing wins, I sometimes go and peruse the forums of the team that we've just won, just to get an idea, because you want to get a bit of balance. Like, you want to get the sort of the other side of it. Not that you're going to get a balance, in the moment, you're going to get a very emotional reaction, but you get a few.
But that's where the amusing part comes.
Yeah, obviously, that's where you want. But there was a lot of Chelsea fans. I don't know whether this is classic revisionism going on, but there was a lot of Chelsea fans talking about when they were doing really well in the early part of the season, and they were second, I think, in the early stages.
They had a hell of a start. Yeah,
there's a lot of Chelsea fans basically now going, that was Maresca basically using Pochettino's tactics.
I agree with them, by the way.
And what you've seen over the last few months is that you've now seen him implementing his own system, which is really rigid and basically doesn't allow players to actually express themselves. They're in really tight boxes that they have to navigate. And you're just shackling their potential, is what a lot of Chelsea fans are now saying.
I mean, they're not wrong though when you look at it, right? Like,
let's say.
I mean, that sounds pretty spot on, because and most Leicester fans I know were shocked at the appointment. They were like, "What?" Like, they didn't like. Obviously, they were a bit annoyed that they'd just lost their manager for the.
But they didn't walk the league. They didn't batter the Championship into submission, did they? In the way that
was their entire surprise that he actually wasn't. He actually kind of got found out in the Championship.
They had a few games where they were getting it was getting a little bit nervy at various points, wasn't it? Towards the latter stages.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, again, I'm not going to get revisionist here. Every Leicester fan I know was sad to see him go, because no one wants that kind of upheaval right before the season back in the Prem. But they were all very surprised at that appointment and did not see why they didn't understand. And it's never good when a team that's just been promoted can't understand why their manager would be picked out for one of the biggest jobs in the country, right? Like that's probably like an immediate warning sign that like something could go wrong here. And we watched it again for the third goal, another Minteh goal, to round off the double that we've kind of namesaked this episode for. 2 wins over Chelsea and a brace from Minteh to finish them off. And again, you talk about that quick transition. We had, again, we're 2-0 up and they're pouring everything on us. And it starts just outside their box. And they've got 4 defenders and we've got 3 attackers already in their box. That's the kind of like brave football that you hear about them wanting to play, right? Like defensively solid, but brave going forward. And Levi Colwill is honestly barely touched by Danny Welbeck and goes down and stays down, demanding a foul. Everyone kind of thinks it's going to get given, but it's not. So Minteh takes the ball on the right-hand side, links up with Welbs, unbelievable pass through to Minteh. And again, it felt very Trossard-like, but on the right-hand side. The touches he made, again, just sent Cucurella off for a hot dog. Like he was done. He absolutely rinsed him again. And I think this sums up the current atmosphere at Chelsea. When Minteh is linking up with Welbs, Colwill is still outside the box, jogging back to position.
And the goal is scored from the position where he would have been, right?
Yeah. When Minteh gets the ball on the edge, right, like before he rinses Cucurella, he is still jogging. And then he puts on a burst of speed after he's beaten Cucurella. Too late. Because then, exactly as you say, Minteh is in a wide open space where Levi Colwill's should be, and then slots it into the back of the net and just puts the game to bed. That summarizes the disaster that Chelsea is. And I think it really, really summarizes how lethal we were and economical we were in front of goal. Because the finish was excellent. The play to get himself open was excellent. And Welbeck, again, with an absolute beauty of an assist, wasn't it? Like, that's 2 very close quarter, calm, composed, gentle passes into goal-scoring areas.
And it reminded me a little bit of the Pedro Palace goal last year, wasn't it? Where it was a very similar little layoff from Welbeck. He loves those little, like, cute touches. And it's funny that he's done it often enough now that it's not unexpected, and yet no defenders never pick it.
Yeah, it's mental, isn't it?
I mean,
really,
it's beautiful.
He's been doing it for a long time.
Is just, yeah, he has. I mean, it's the Cucurella thing is just perfect, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, I definitely think over the 2 games, like, the Amex crowd deserves at least an assist for one of the goals in terms of that, because his head, like, over the course of those 2 games, like, his head is gone, right? His head has absolutely fallen off in both of those games.
I would argue that if you're the next Chelsea manager when they come to visit next year, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not going to be Enzo Maresca, I genuinely bench him. I don't care if he's in the form of his life. He is not mentally capable of coming to the Amex. And we all berate the Amex atmosphere. That man is not capable. We turn into a different animal altogether when that man's on the ball. And his head loss is phenomenal.
It's amazing, isn't it? This is a guy who has... It's a guy who's, like, performed in the Euro final, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Too much of a problem. And yet he comes to the Amex and he just cannot handle it. It's hilarious.
It's amazing.
And I saw, like, those people going, "Oh, should we still be booing him?" You go, "Absolutely," because his head falls off and it makes
even louder
difference to the game. Yeah, like,
yeah, why wouldn't you? Like, get louder. After that, yellow card for Fernando Enzo, who's fuming. And then some subs are made. James George and Dewsbury Hall come on for Gusto, Neto, and Caicedo. And then the Albion run through and make a couple of changes themselves. Pedro on for Ruta. Again, such a lethal change as well. Like, that's a nasty change to make. Like, whichever way round it is, like, you've got rid of Ruta or Pedro and you're bringing on the other one. Like, like, horrible to have to deal with. Diego Gomez comes on for Hinchelwood. O'Reilly and Ayari come on for Welbeck and Baleba, and Adingra comes on late for Minteh. Some of those depth pieces are coming back as well, isn't they? Which is nice to see.
Definitely.
Unbelievable statage for you. When we have less possession than the opponent, I saw this on Twitter earlier. I made a note of it. When we have less possession than the opponent this season, bear in mind our entire identity and who we are since Potter walked through the door. We have won 7, drawn 3, and lost none. We have not lost a single game yet where the other team has more possession than us in the Premier League. Do you is that not a crazy stat to you? And I think that also does that not echo a changing of the guard of we're seeing yet another tactical evolution in the game of football, right? Like the tiki-taka possession days are slowly fading away into a new way of football again, right? And I'm sure we'll see this as we do, right? We see this every couple of years, this new change. To me, I think like we've just summarized it in 90 minutes of football that the world is changing, and this possession-based tactic, tiki-taka football, even vertically, right, is not something that is effective as much anymore.
I think we've talked in other episodes this year in where we've gone back to a little bit of the Potter ball stuff. I mean, what we've accused Chelsea of in this game, basically, having possession for the sake of possession and not doing anything with it. And eventually, I think one of the effects of it is that you end up having so much possession and you do so little with it that it becomes a millstone around your neck in that game, because the level of expectation in the crowd goes up because you're dominating the ball. And if you don't do anything with it, it naturally breeds frustration, doesn't it? Players and crowd alike. Whereas if you're happy to let the other team have the ball, the onus is on them to do something with it. And I think maybe it frees the shackles slightly in an odd way. And it's the kind of thing like you'd expect. It's not how you'd expect teams to play at home. And I
not
think
at all.
One of the last episodes I was on before this, we were talking about how, if you were setting up to play against the Albion, there are certain ways that you'd set up where you wouldn't naturally do it. If you're Liverpool or I think we talked about it in the context of the Man United game. Like if you were to try and beat the Albion, you'd set up at Old Trafford in a way that would be deeply unacceptable to the people that go and watch at Old Trafford.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's really interesting, like, to see managers now maybe thinking actually it's more pragmatic. And if it works, I mean, I don't know enough about, like, was Hertzler, St. Pauli, did they dominate the ball, or did they play more of this counter-attacking? It'll be interesting to see the possession stats from his last season with St. Pauli, to see whether there's any correlation with a style of less possession but more pragmatism. I don't know. But it's really fascinating to see it evolving, and evolving quite quickly. Because that's not something we've seen, well, up until really the last 2 games in any guys.
They had the second most amount of possession last season in the Bundesliga too. Only Magdeburg had more. St. Pauli averaged 55.4% possession.
So that's more impressive. So that's actually more impressive that he's pivoted to this. He's not gone back to like his back catalogue, right?
Right. Yeah. He's not playing the hits.
No, he's pivoted. He's sort of on the fly. He's come up with a hit record, basically. to take your analogy, whilst everyone's watching and under pressure, he's knocked out like Life on Mars with just casually, whilst everyone's there, which is very impressive.
Yeah,
but I think the whole. I mean, I'm sure you guys probably talked about it last week after the cup game, but Van Hecke's team talk afterwards. Did you mention this after the Chelsea game last week? Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
So after the cup game, they all come back into the dressing room.
Yeah.
This is before Hertzler arrives, so it's just all the players sitting there. And Van Hecke gives essentially an impromptu team talk. And he basically says that game's just the start, and that they have to keep doing that over and over again. And what's quite interesting, and Hertzler actually comes in and says the same thing, even though Van Hecke's just said it. He basically says that was the first time that they have played a game like they've trained during the week. And he said, I can't remember the exact quote of Van Hecke, it was something like, "We don't stop anymore," which implies a a change of mentality, right? And it's flicked a switch, because it wasn't just, I know we've talked about speed of transition from defense to attack being noticeably different.
Yep.
But there's a few other aspects in those two games that I've seen that are just I mean, it's obviously a reaction to the Forest game. It'll be really interesting to see if this is carried through, right? Because obviously you need a reaction to that game. Like, you just have to. Like, you cannot, there's not a world in which it's acceptable to not come back and do something.
I mean, we
So it'll be
talked about
interesting
it,
to
right,
see.
on the day. We talked about it at the like after the Forest game, right? We talked about the absolute necessity to have an answer, and we talked very clearly and very like honestly that if we didn't have a reaction for episodes 280 and 281, 282 might be Hertzler's last hurrah. Like, we genuinely thought that if we go back to the Amex and get dicked on, like beaten 3-0 and 4-1, right? Like back to back, and then not get a result at Southampton, like there could be some serious overhaul and change going on. We all wanted to see a reaction.
Doors. Yeah, it's a massive sliding doors moment, isn't it? But other than the transition, I mean, I think the work rate I've seen across the last two games has been a stark difference. But that's why I say it'll be interesting to see if that's carried on, or whether or not this is whether or not it's an effect of having to make a bit of a show of the fact that we had that result at the City Ground. But the other thing is, like, the desire, coupled to that work rate, the desire to win the ball back has also been noticeably different in the last two games from virtually everybody. Like,
and
noticeably
what I find
different.
interesting is that I don't know whether it was Hertzler himself when he talked about what happened after Forest, or whether it was Veltman. But someone said in an interview somewhere that they had a very honest conversation as a team.
Yeah, it was Veltman, I think. Yeah,
they weren't working hard enough in training and maybe weren't giving what they could. And like that, that lends credence to the fact that we may have had discontentment at some point in the camp, right? Like, if there's not effort being put in and issues going on. But whatever, I mean, that 7-0 is the biggest kick up the arse anyone could ever get, right? Like, because that doesn't just reflect badly on Hertzler, that reflects badly on every single football player conceding 7 goals in a football game. So unbelievable. The response has been fantastic. Who Scored have posted their Premier League team of the week. And I genuinely have never seen one be this high before in my life. Marmouche, great weekend for him. He scored a 9.40. Nwanweri, I can't say his bloody name. For Arsenal, 9.69. Fantastic, obviously. Yankuba Minteh, 9.95. Who scored?
Jeez. Wow.
If anybody has any doubt as to whether their eye test was backed up in the statistics, you can rest easy going into your Tuesday, because every metric on the planet says that Minteh had an unbelievable football game. He was unbelievable in every single aspect and part of the football game. He made 5 tackles on Friday, which is joint most with Carlos Baleba. He had interceptions, he had clearances, he had 2 goals, he had 3 key passes, which was more than anybody else. And he only had 36 touches, which is the mentalist thing. Like, he didn't even have a bunch of touches on it.
No.
And
I mean, when you look at stats like that, you go, he has to be man of the match, right? And you have to be. I mean, even though Mitoma, like, it's mad. Like, Mitoma can score a goal that we probably won't see the like of again in a very long time. And yet, you have, based on those stats, you can't give him man of the match.
No, I mean, you can't. You really can't. And like, I love him to death, but like, I don't think anyone is going to say otherwise, right? Like, for me and yourself, like, I think it's pretty safe to say he. Like,
it has to be.
And I think that goes back to what you said, the unbelievable defensive work he is putting in. If you are a winger on their left-hand side, rampaging down the wing, that must be just infuriating seeing a lad that fast track back and then putting a defensive challenge that's effective. Like, you must feel like this is absolutely not allowed. Like, this is unethical.
Yeah, and then he's just nicked the ball off you, and then he's just streaking back the other way, and now you've got to go and do the same, and you're not going to get anywhere near him.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And yeah,
Just,
and you know that if you do get past Veltman, if you do get past Minteh, you've then got one of the kind of snakiest right-sided defenders in the Premier League, and I mean that in the nicest possible way.
I mean, he
there
is
to,
our defender of the dark arts, right? I
yeah,
think
he just
people have
really
said that
is.
already, but like he is the dark arts guy. Like,
He just
and
is, right?
I think every successful Premier League team needs to have one. Like, I said this a couple of times in the pub. It's so funny that like all these big clubs fans were so patronizing for so long of like little old Brighton. Like, they're a great club, like they're really nice, but like they're too naive, aren't they? Like they don't have any nasty bastards. Like they're never going to get any higher than where they are because they just don't they're too naive to be in the league for like too long. They'll do a Southampton, they'll do this, and now we've got Veltman and a couple of others that João Pedro, right, that like know that how to play these games. All of a sudden it's like, hate Brighton, dirty team, want them relegated, like they're scumbag team, like it's not fair, like they shouldn't be allowed to get draws and wins against us.
Like, we've arrived.
It's
That's it.
yeah.
That's
when you're upsetting people, you've got a well-rounded setup.
He's so hated by neutral fans as well. It's phenomenal. Arsenal fans especially, obviously, but phenomenal. But I think it now becomes that right side of Veltman and Minteh, I think, really picks itself, and they seem to work really well together. It's not just two players like with the right attributes. They seem to gel together,
Yeah,
like as a partnership down there. Because Veltman must be loving it because he's not having to cover the yards. Because Minteh's basically doing everything. Minteh's doing the yards in attack and defense. So Veltman basically just needs to concentrate on defending. He doesn't need to worry about being done for pace, right? Which is our concern about him.
Yeah, he was essentially being allowed to play wide centre half.
Yeah,
like that's essentially what the role he was given, and
that's his dream role pretty much, because he doesn't have to worry about being done for pace because Minteh's going to be back there, and he can, concentrate on just defending, which we know he's very, very good at.
Yeah,
so it seems like a dream scenario.
Stephen in the chat saying Hinchelwood is boring but very underrated. Like, I mean, you've got to look back on that too. Like, he was given a really shit hand, having to do.
He has been in that Villa game as well, right? He must be thinking, what on earth have I done to deserve the two biggest defeats we've had in recent times?
He's been the
pivot in both of them.
Yeah,
it's so unfair for a kid who's 20, 21.
He's 19 still.
Oh, jeez, that's just so brutal. But I mean, that's good. That's character building, right? In a lot of ways.
I feel like he wouldn't agree with it, but I agree with you. I think
that's the spin I'm putting on it. But I think Steven's bang on, which is, I think, he does a lot of underrated stuff, especially off the ball. And I think this is going to sound absolutely mental, but I'm going to compare him to Rodri in the way that he sets the tempo. Do you know what I mean? Like, he keeps it ticking. Like, his energy there, he kind of keeps it ticking over. He doesn't let it lull. And maybe that's linked to the fact we're seeing the work rate. Like, he almost sets he's setting that standard. So I'm not putting him at Rodri's level by any means, but that particular attribute of almost he's the engine.
Yeah. No, I can actually.
He's doing the kind of unglamorous stuff. And obviously, he pops up with goals. We've seen that. He's got a knack of being in the right place at the right time. But I think
hell of a header on him for such an average dude.
Yeah, but I think that's the important. I think when he's got the coverage around him, he's free to actually set that tempo. Be interesting. I mean, Thomas Tuchel was there watching.
He was.
So I mean, Hinchelwood's he's been in England under 21s for a while, and that centre midfield position for England is not, other than Declan Rice, right? No one else has nailed it down. Kobbie Mainoo just seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth after a pretty promising start.
Yeah.
Conor Gallagher seemingly, again, I don't know how much football he's getting for Atletico. I don't really follow that league particularly, but there's no one other than Declan Rice that really has that centre midfield position nailed down. I don't think he's quite ready for it yet, but I wouldn't say he's a million miles off if he can keep his fitness.
Well, I mean, in the battle of the centre backs, there's not going to be many men much more happier to see old Thomas Tuchel than Adam Webster after the performance he put in as well, right? Like
phenomenal.
He had a hell of a game, and I think also you talk about tempo setting. I think the big one there for me is Jorginho. Like you talk about tempo setting, like he going forward at least, or like pressing from the front, leading from the front. I think that's why he's able to just replace Pedro so easily. Like they're able to switch because we've seen how well Pedro can lead from the front, right? And when everyone's against the wall and you're 0-0 against Marseille at the Amex with minutes to go, it's him slamming it into the roof of the net, right? When the crowd are wanting him head chopped off and paraded around the streets, it's him slamming in goals in Marseille, in Athens, right? Like, and Jorginho has that exact same.
He's got that energy, right? Main character energy. Right?
And I mean that run that he made for the second goal was just like he created that goal. Like the ball from Baleba to Ruta. From then on, his one-touch football with Welbeck, his driving and strength to get into the box, to like jump through three odd challenges and then fizz that ball across. Like he is just so good and so important to this team. It's honestly, like I honestly thought at one point, like I'm not sure what he can do to justify £40 million because he was that's so much money for an Albion fan's brain to like get through. And we're sitting here on February the 17th, and I'm like, it was worth every penny.
Yeah, 100%. There's no doubt about it. Like, he's definitely worth that. I mean, it's the balance that, and he's just so like, it's what you can tell he's the engine of the team spirit.
Absolutely.
As well, already. I mean,
so
as a new player, right? Like, he's the one. I mean, there was that game, was it? Like, obviously, the celebrations they always do at the end, right? And there was that game when Minteh got it wrong. And he managed to basically corrected him and like almost sent him out to do it again.
Yeah.
In a kind of PE teacher way, right? Like, but it was like, it's that kind of thing. And everyone was taking it as in the right spirit, as it were. It's quite funny.
I think the social media admin are just giving him the phone now.
Yeah, it seems to be after every game and off he goes. But we've seen that. I mean, like you need someone like that as well.
We absolutely do.
Who can just bring it. So, I mean, it's an interesting place to be, isn't it? I mean, the Southampton, after those two games, as ever, after a couple of big wins, the whole place feels, amazingly different. But, I mean, it's still been, I mean, it could have gone the other way, right? As we've talked about. I can't underestimate how much of a pivotal, like sliding doors moment the last two games have been.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're all delighted that it went the way that it did. I mean, there's no one out there who's upset, right, that Herzler's got a couple of wins in the bag.
But the team in 13th probably are, but other than that, yeah.
but you know what I mean? I think the fact that, I think we can't forget that it was how much of a sliding doors moment it is. And, it may well, we may well look back on the season and actually that 7-0 demolition could end up being the key moment in the season. There's a world there's a world in which we qualify for Europe and win the FA Cup, right? No, but they're but I'm not. I mean, I say like if you go to that point, it's very. I mean, do you know what I mean? There won't be many teams that if you do that, off the back of having been demolished 7-0, not in the early part of the season, right? Like,
no, I agree
beyond the halfway point, it'll be really interesting to see if they can keep this up. So I think the Southampton game will be really interesting. Whether we see the same attributes carried into it.
Really will. We're sat in 10th now, 37 points from 25 games. Southampton, bottom of the league, 25 games played, 9 points, 19 goals scored, 57 conceded. I mean, they're by every metric possible in the Premier League, they are the worst. Unsurprisingly.
What did Derby get? 9 points. What did that Derby team get? 9 points as well.
Yeah, I was talking about like this season. They're just the worst at everything. But yes, Derby also had 9. So I mean, honestly, it's not unbelievably crazy to think they don't do anything for the rest of the season. If the players act like the fans, right? Like they could really just lose every game for the rest of the year.
Right, other than like shanking in a lucky 1-0 win against us, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
That's the thing.
There was some interesting results though this weekend, I thought. Obviously the Manchester City revival is well and truly on its way, absolutely dicking Newcastle at home. Bournemouth beating Southampton, again, not too surprising. Ipswich, though, I wanted to bring up and talk a little bit about. Ipswich took a point away at Villa with 10 men. Julio Enciso went off within about 17 minutes, holding his knee, non-contact injury. And I think it was McKenna who said he felt pain or an issue on his left knee. Not good. Nick in the chat. Nick Ansley is live in the chat. Brighton v Saints.
He's just missed it. He's literally arrived after I made that joke.
Derby got 11. Derby got 11 points.
Okay, they could conceivably not get that.
Yeah, I mean they really could. It's mental. But Julio Enciso started off his life at Ipswich quite well. Like obviously only a couple of appearances in, and it looks like there's genuine potential here that it may be a very short-lived loan, doesn't it? Because he also, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he have meniscus issues prior? Not,
don't know which
not what you want to see.
You think the potential it must be this. It's not that unlikely that it's the same issue again.
50-50 chance in it, really. He's only got two knees. It's got one or the other. I just hope it's not as bad as first feared in my brain. But I mean, first of all, the result itself is strange, but the talking point really there for me was Enciso going down is not good. The other one to touch on as well is West Ham getting beat by Brentford at home. One of the teams with the worst away records in the league going to Potter's West Ham winning. That puts them up to 16th in the away table and only just puts them out of that bottom grouping because before that, they were actually 19th with Leicester. They were honestly shocking. Again, the point here is Evan Ferguson came on for 45 minutes of football, actually looked like one of their brightest sparks throughout that last 45 minutes of football. Do you think Potter gets the time? And do you think it's time to already start playing Evan Ferguson instead of playing Lucas freaking Paqueta up front? Because that's just seems bizarre to me.
Mad. It worked quite well, Paqueta up front in that game where he did it. They played pretty well. Will he get the time? I think we all know the answer to that at West Ham, right? No, he won't get the time. Like
they already don't like him. Yeah.
No, they won't get the time. Which is why I thought it was an odd. I thought of all the owners that you'd want to go and work for, he's picked again two of the most unstable ones.
Yeah.
In recent times in terms of managers.
Bizarre.
It's bizarre. And he's picked a squad. He's picked a club and a squad where generally the expectation is writing checks that the quality can't cash, right?
Yep.
Of the fans. I mean, they've got a decent squad, but there is an expectation there always that they are competing towards the top of the division. It's difficult. I mean, yeah, I think it's obviously it's way too early for people to be forming very strong opinions of it. But I think he's only won. Has he had 6 or 7 games there? And I think he's won 1. I think he won his first game, didn't he?
He beat Fulham
3-2. Yeah, won his first league game, I think.
And then lost to Palace, drew with Villa, lost to Chelsea, lost to Brentford, and Man City as well.
Yeah.
Sitting in 16th, they're lucky. He's lucky that there are 4 very bad football teams because he's still 8 points clear of Wolves in 17th.
They'll be fine.
Shocking.
But I don't think he's going to get that. I mean, I think he's not going to get. He's obviously going to get the summer window. He's going to have a proper pre-season. He's going to have the summer he'll presumably get some money to spend. I think he's not going to have. He's not going to have a huge amount of grace going into the beginning of next season if they struggle off the bat straight away. I think they're going to be in a slight issue, and I think it's very similar for Amorim. at Man United. Obviously, he's taking them backwards. The issue that he's
significantly backwards, right?
I mean, the big issue that he has got is he's come in wanting to play this very specific style that worked at Sporting, and by his own admission, they don't have the players to do it. He said that openly a few times.
Very
they haven't got the players to do it.
Worst Manchester United team in history.
But it seems, but when you say that so openly, you go, I haven't got the players to do it. It seems so bizarre to then carry on, like doing that same formation, that same system. Because if it's me, the problem that he's got is he's going to get to the summer, and they're probably going to be able to move. They're going to move some players out, and they're going to move some players in. Albeit the worse they get, if they continue to be this terrible for the rest of the season, the amount of money that clubs are going to pay for the players they want to get rid of is going down by the week, right?
And those players are going to want to keep the stupid wages, right? So
so it's
going to be even harder to offload them.
But the problem that you've got from his personal point of view is he's going to get to the summer, he's going to move players out and he's going to move players in, and he's then basically going to be in a position where he's then going to be like, okay, fine, I've now got more of the players to play my system. But he's going to have no patience. The level of patience that he's going to get from fans is going to be so small.
Yeah.
If he'd have come in and he'd have gone, look, we all know this is a style I want to play. I haven't got the players. If he pragmatically just changed it, right, for this 6 months to go, look, for these 6 months, I'm going to look at the players that I've got and we'll try and make it work. You'd have a lot more grace than him just going, I'm going to play this way anyway, and we'll see what happens. Like
it would be
it's a mad decision.
Let's stick with the Ten Hag tactics and outlook, and let's train my vision. At the same time, like they can do both, right? Like, and
they're elite footballers who should be. But it's just asking. I mean, from his personal point of view, it's asking for trouble. Because I think it means that when you do get those players and you can properly play the system, people are going to expect miracles very quickly, because they're going to go, fine, you've had like 6 months of playing the style already. But the problem you've also got is those players that stay, they're going to have had 6 months of playing this style of football and failing in it. So does that make the system more difficult to stick if you've got players that go,
going to be a lot of people already unhappy.
We've tried this like over and over again and it doesn't work. So I think it's mad. I think it's a mad decision all round for him to do it. I think it's a weird time to take the job.
Yeah, odd. Should have just took it in the summer, last summer or this summer. Doesn't matter which. But
mid-season to bring in someone who's got like a totally different style and to keep it without a pre-season is just naive at best.
To end on a positive note, Everton, they've earned 10 points of their 30 in Moyes' first 5 games. Wins against Spurs, us, Leicester, and Palace, and then a draw at Liverpool against Liverpool at home. That defeat is probably going to look less annoying come game 38. And we look back on the season than it did at the time, don't you think? I think already the writing's on the wall, right? Like Moisey has very much turned this team around, and it must hurt for a coach like Deitch, right, who sees Moyes come in and play basically the same kind of football, but just highly more effectively and just get like 30 points on the board immediately, like absolutely bonkers. Like it's crazy.
I mean, I think I might be a bit of an outlier, and I think Moyes gets far more criticism than his CV deserves overall. Like I write off that Man United spell based on what's happened at Man United with every other manager since Sir Alex Ferguson. Like he's
the well is poisoned. It's not the managers, and
Man United thing is, and I think he's done all right. I mean, obviously did well with West Ham. He won a trophy with West Ham. Like, you can criticize the guy's style of play, right? I mean, no one's going to sit there and go, he plays brilliant football. But as an effective Premier League manager, and he's managed 700 or 800 games in the Premier League, near enough. Like
it was his 700th against us.
Yeah, that was it. So obviously, but I think it's quite. I think it's quite sort of fashionable to be anti-David Moyes, just as a kind of thing. But I do think I think on a serious note, I think he gets more criticism than his achievements would warrant.
Yeah, I think it's just like you say. I think it's the start of football and what people want to see these days. It's cool. It's cool to shit on him, isn't it?
But actually, he's a decent manager. I mean, especially if you look at the clubs, West Ham, he had that decent West Ham team that won the Conference League or whatever.
Yep.
Lopetegui comes in and Potter's come in, and they don't look like they're getting anything like the same kind of tune out of them that David Moyes does. And what does that do? If you're Potter or Lopetegui, and the general vibe that people have about David Moyes, how must that sit with you going, I'm doing worse with this team than the guy who gets criticized by everybody for being boring and terrible. Like,
it's awful.
It must be, but there we go.
Southampton next, away from home. This is their third home game in a row and their last one for a little bit. After us, they go to Chelsea and Liverpool back to back. That is exactly the kind of game a faltering Chelsea want, right? Like Southampton at home. And then title chasing Liverpool right afterwards is absolutely brutal. We've got to win this, right? Like, surely, for crying out loud, like, can we stop like memeing around on this stuff and like actually just get a boring 3-1 or 2-0 victory in the same manner as we did at Ipswich? Like, please, that's all I ask. Like, just go there and be as pragmatic and boring as possible, but get us to 40 points and keep us in touch with those European spots. However lucky it seems, doesn't matter. Like, just get us, like, please don't make ourselves look like idiots again. Like, we've just turned it around and look good. Let's not do this, right? Like, no. I feel like we all have this sense of dread with a game like this, but it's please don't F this up. Like, this,
I know it's one of the worst games to have after this, right? You'd almost want to be going to like Spurs or something. Like, you'd want to be going to somewhere where there's sort of less expectation, but almost the same level of chance of getting something. But this is just like, but as we said, it's really crucial to see whether these two games that we've just had are they a short-term response to the Forest game, or are we seeing the actual shoots of a longer-term Hertzler kind of consistent style?
Yeah,
so I think it's really interesting. I think it's fascinating to see what happens, and I'm with you. Like, I can see a world in which we win 3-0, but I can also see a world in which we lose 1-0 after having 400 shots and they've had one. So, I mean, the only thing to remember, that Southampton home game, we turned them into Guardiola's Barcelona for about 15 minutes, didn't we? And we were quite lucky with a reasonably dodgy offside VAR decision to come away with a point in that game. So, we'll see.
Well, it's Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff. Hooray! Finally, it's Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff. So we'll be back next Sunday probably to talk through this one, and just please God, let the good times continue for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I know there was an episode 2 episodes ago or whatever, consistently inconsistent, but I'm sick of it because it has summed up our whole season so far, and like let's just win this one and move on and see
a routine, boring 2-0 win. Thanks very much.
The vibe shift is fully sorted. Like, we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good rest of your week, everybody. And we'll chat next weekend.